There is a strange assumption many people still carry in silence. If a woman lives alone without a man, people immediately start creating stories in their minds. Some think she is lonely. Some think she is bitter. Some think she failed at relationships. Others secretly envy her freedom but would never admit it openly. And the truth is, society often struggles to understand women who choose independence. Not because independence is wrong, but because independence forces people to question what they were taught. This conversation is deeper than relationships. It is really about identity, emotional survival, and self-awareness. And today, we are going to talk honestly about it. Most people do not realize how much human beings are shaped by expectations. From childhood, women are often told that happiness must eventually involve a man. Not peace, not purpose, not self-discovery, not emotional intelligence, but partnership. So when a woman chooses solitude or independence, it quietly challenges a social script many people grew up believing. And that discomfort creates judgment, sometimes open judgment, sometimes silent judgment, but underneath it all is psychology. Now, this video is not about attacking men, and it is not about glorifying isolation either. Healthy relationships are beautiful when they are built on respect and emotional maturity. But we also have to be honest about something many people avoid discussing. Some women discover themselves only after they learn how to stand emotionally alone. Not because they hate love, but because they got tired of losing themselves trying to be loved. That realization changes people deeply. And once someone starts waking up emotionally, their standards, boundaries, and mindset begin to change. That transformation can confuse the people around them. A lot of women who live alone are not running away from relationships. Some are actually healing from years of emotional exhaustion, years of people-pleasing, years of pretending to be smaller to protect other people's egos, years of carrying emotional burdens nobody noticed. And for the first time in their lives, they finally hear their own thoughts clearly. That silence can become powerful, because when distractions disappear, self-awareness grows louder. And many people are afraid of self-awareness because it forces honesty. Honesty about pain, honesty about patterns. But here is the part people rarely admit. Living alone also exposes emotional weaknesses. It exposes fear. It exposes loneliness. It exposes insecurities people used to hide inside relationships. Because sometimes relationships can become emotional distractions. Some people stay constantly surrounded by others because they are afraid to face themselves. So when someone learns how to sit with themselves peacefully, it becomes a different kind of strength. Not loud strength, not performative strength, but internal strength. And that is what we are really exploring today. The first truth about women who live alone without a man is this. Many of them become deeply self-aware. When a person spends enough time alone, they start noticing their emotional habits more clearly. They notice what triggers them. They notice their fears. They notice how much of their identity was built around pleasing others. And slowly, they begin rebuilding themselves from the inside. That process is uncomfortable, because growth is rarely glamorous. Sometimes awakening looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like finally saying no. The second truth is that solitude changes emotional standards. A woman who learns peace alone becomes less willing to tolerate chaos from others. Not because she thinks she is superior, but because her nervous system has experienced calmness. And once someone experiences emotional peace, dysfunction becomes harder to romanticize. Many people confuse emotional intensity with love. But emotional maturity is different from emotional drama. A woman who has healed emotionally often starts valuing consistency over excitement, respect over attention, stability over empty promises. And that shift changes the type of relationships she accepts, sometimes permanently. The third truth is that many women living alone become mentally stronger than people realize. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because independence forces psychological growth. Bills still exist. Stress still exists. Fear still exists. But every challenge solved alone increases confidence quietly. Human beings become stronger through repeated emotional survival. And over time, independence can create emotional resilience. That resilience is often misunderstood as coldness. But strength and coldness are not the same thing. Sometimes strong people simply stopped explaining themselves constantly. The fourth truth is that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. This is something many people fail to understand. A person can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally alone. And another person can live alone and feel emotionally fulfilled. Loneliness is not always about physical absence. Sometimes it is about emotional disconnection. Some women leave relationships because they were tired of feeling unseen, tired of emotional neglect, tired of carrying conversations, responsibilities, and emotional labor alone. So ironically, some women feel less lonely by themselves than they did inside relationships. That truth makes many people uncomfortable. The fifth truth is that society often punishes women who become emotionally independent. People celebrate independence until it stops being convenient for them. Once a woman stops seeking constant validation, reactions around her begin changing. Some people call her difficult, some call her proud, some call her intimidating. But psychologically, people often react negatively when someone no longer depends on approval. Because emotional independence changes power dynamics. A person who is emotionally grounded becomes harder to manipulate. And manipulation survives best where insecurity exists. That is why healing sometimes changes relationships around you. Not everyone benefits from your growth. The sixth truth is that some women living alone are still healing silently. Not every independent woman is fully healed emotionally. Some are rebuilding after heartbreak. Some are recovering from betrayal. Some are trying to rediscover who they are after losing themselves in unhealthy dynamics. And healing is not linear. Some days people feel powerful. Other days they feel emotionally exhausted. That is part of being human. Inner transformation is not perfection. It is awareness. It is learning. It is emotional honesty. The seventh truth is that modern life changed relationship psychology completely. Today, many women can survive financially without depending entirely on a partner. That changes emotional decision-making. In the past, some people stayed in unhealthy situations because survival required it. Now, emotional fulfillment matters more than ever before. People want peace. People want respect. People want emotional safety. And because expectations changed, relationships now require deeper emotional intelligence to survive. Control no longer works the same way. Fear no longer works the same way. Awareness changed the game completely. The eighth truth is that living alone teaches emotional responsibility. When nobody is constantly around to distract you, you begin facing yourself honestly. Your habits become visible. Your emotional wounds become visible. Your coping mechanisms become visible. And many people discover they were blaming others for patterns they never addressed internally. Self-awareness can be painful at first, but it also becomes liberating. Because once you understand yourself clearly, you stop living on emotional autopilot. You become more intentional, more emotionally mature, more conscious of your energy and choices. The ninth truth is that some women genuinely enjoy their own company. This shocks people more than it should, because many societies trained people to believe being alone automatically means sadness. But emotional peace can become addictive in a healthy way. Reading quietly, thinking clearly, resting without pressure, living without emotional chaos. For some people, that lifestyle feels healing. And once someone becomes emotionally comfortable alone, they stop entering relationships out of desperation. They become more selective, not because they hate people, but because they value emotional alignment more deeply. The 10th truth is that independence can reveal hidden emotional wounds in others too. Sometimes people become angry at independent women because it forces them to examine themselves. It makes people question their own emotional dependency. It makes people wonder whether they truly know themselves outside relationships. And self-reflection can be uncomfortable. Psychologically, humans often criticize what secretly triggers insecurity inside them. That is why judgment sometimes says more about the observer than the person being judged. Not always, but often. And emotionally awakened people eventually realize something powerful. Not every opinion deserves emotional access to your peace. At the end of the day, living alone is not automatically success. And being in a relationship is not automatically failure either. The real question is deeper than relationship status. Are you emotionally healthy? Are you self-aware? Are you living honestly? Because people can hide emotional emptiness behind relationships just as easily as they can hide pain behind independence. Human psychology is complicated, and maturity begins when we stop reducing people to simple labels. Life is always more layered than appearances. Many women who live alone are simply learning themselves again, learning what peace feels like, learning what boundaries feel like, learning how to trust their intuition again, learning how to exist without constantly performing for approval. That process can look strange to people who have never experienced emotional awakening. But growth often looks unfamiliar before it becomes understood. And sometimes solitude becomes the classroom where emotional wisdom develops quietly. Not quickly, not perfectly, but deeply. At the same time, independence should never become emotional isolation. Human beings still need connection, still need understanding, still need love, still need healthy emotional support. The goal is not to reject relationships completely. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself inside relationships. That is the real transformation many people are beginning to understand. Because self-respect changes the way people love. It changes the way people communicate. It changes the way people tolerate disrespect. And that shift can completely change someone's life. One thing many emotionally awakened people discover is this. Peace is expensive emotionally, not financially, emotionally, because protecting your peace sometimes requires difficult decisions. It requires boundaries. It requires walking away from draining environments. It requires disappointing people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. And not everybody will understand your transformation. Some people only liked the version of you that tolerated everything silently. Growth changes relationships naturally. That is part of awakening. There is also another truth people avoid discussing openly. Some people are more afraid of being alone than being unhappy. That fear drives many unhealthy choices. It drives emotional settling. It drives toxic attachment. It drives desperation disguised as love. But emotional maturity teaches something different. Being alone temporarily is not the worst in the world. Losing yourself completely is worse. And many women eventually realize that preserving inner peace matters deeply. Not because they stopped valuing love, but because they finally started valuing themselves too. The deeper lesson here is not even about women specifically. It is about human awakening. It is about what happens when people stop living entirely for external validation. When they stop measuring worth only through relationships, approval, or social expectations. That shift changes identity. And identity changes behavior. People begin asking different questions. What actually makes me happy? What drains me emotionally? Who am I when nobody is watching? Those questions create transformation from the inside outward. And transformation always changes perspective. Some viewers watching this may relate personally. Others may disagree completely. And that is okay. The goal is not to force one worldview on everyone. The goal is to encourage deeper thinking. Because mature conversations require nuance. People are different. Experiences are different. Emotional journeys are different. But one thing remains true. Self-awareness changes human beings profoundly. And once someone becomes conscious emotionally, they rarely see life the same way again. Maybe the biggest mistake society makes is assuming people are incomplete alone. Completion does not come from another human being magically fixing emptiness inside us. Healthy relationships work best when two emotionally grounded people meet each other honestly. Not when one person becomes the entire identity of the other. That creates emotional imbalance eventually. Inner stability matters. Self-respect matters. Emotional intelligence matters. And people who develop those qualities often approach love differently afterward. More consciously, more carefully, more intentionally. So before judging women who live alone without a man, maybe ask deeper questions instead. What has she learned about herself? What has she survived emotionally? What kind of peace has she protected? What kind of emotional growth shaped her choices? Because every human being carries invisible battles others cannot fully see. And maturity means learning not to reduce people to shallow assumptions. Real understanding requires empathy. Real wisdom requires emotional depth. And emotionally awakened people eventually stop chasing appearances and start seeking truth instead. That is where transformation truly begins. If this video made you think differently, take a moment to reflect honestly. What patterns have you noticed in yourself? What emotional truths have you been avoiding? What kind of peace are you protecting or searching for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you realized about yourself and other people while watching this video. And if this message connected with you deeply, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more conversations about psychology, self-awareness, and inner transformation. Because sometimes the deepest awakening begins with one uncomfortable truth. The relationship you have with yourself shapes every other relationship in your life. And once you truly understand that, you start living differently forever.